I'm sorry if I was a little disheveled. I am fighting off a cold, and I fell asleep right after I finished watching today's movie. And then I woke up, and so it's been like 3 hours. Also, I have this beautiful scratch on my face because this morning, Mr. Rochester was sleeping on my head, and then he fell, and he scratched my face. Um, Life with a cat, always thrilling. So, today's movie, it turns out the Miranda July's other film, The Future, is not on Netflix. So there's another movie called The Future, also directed by a woman, on there. So instead, I watched Patricia Rozema. Patricia Rozema's film, 1987 film, I Heard the Mermaids Singing, which is a Canadian film, and actually the Toronto Film Festival called it the 9th best Canadian film of all time in 1993, but then when they redid their list in 2004, it fell off the list because this one guy, I don't remember, but this one director had like 3 or 4 of the movies on the list. I think that's some bullshit. Like, one director did not make 4 of Canada's 10 best films. Like, I'm sorry. Also, spread the wealth around. Also, of the 3 times they have compiled this list, only one woman has ever made the list, and that was Patricia Rozema for this one film. And I'm like, that's also bullshit. It was probably all dudes voting on it. Sorry, Toronto. That's just how I feel. Anyways, this film was wonderful. I loved it. I love the 80s. So anything made in the 80s that feels very 80s, I love. And this one felt very lo-fi 80s with the 80s hair and a little bit of DIY punk mixed in, which is always good. So it's about a woman named Polly, played by Sheila McCarthy, who has been on her own for 10 years since her parents died and has just sort of floated around as a secretary in a company called, used to be called Girl Friday, and now it's called Person Friday, probably because they let men in. They're like temp secretarial services, but she's a daydreamer. It's sort of like The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, where it goes off into her daydreams, but all of her daydreams are in black and white and mostly appear to be set at the turn of the century, sort of. It's interesting. But so she's a bit of a daydreamer, and she's not very good at typing, so she's kind of a terrible secretary. And she ends up being a secretary for a rich art gallery owner, whom she then falls in love with, even though prior to this she'd only been dating men. And it's sort of an interesting way of showing that you might think you're one thing all this time until you smack run into something else, and you're like, oh, because sexuality and love can be very fluid and can have nothing to do with gender. I think she even talks about Freud's theory about how babies are polyamorous or polymorphous, poly something. Oh God, I'm sorry, I've been asleep. And that society is the one that forces us to go one way or the other. But he calls it a perversion, and she's like, it's not a perversion, it's just natural. And so it's sort of one of those films where they throw in some very weighty political messaging without really letting you know that's what's happening, and it's always great too. In a movie with a very strong point of view about art and artists and criticism, which if you are like a upcoming artist, I would suggest watching this movie to get some perspective on criticism, because I think it had some really, really healthy, interesting things to say about being an artist and dealing with criticism. There's only 81 minutes. It's on Netflix. Sheila McCarthy's amazing. She gives a great, beautiful, whimsical performance. There's literally like 5 characters in the whole movie, and 3 of them are women. It's kind of wonderful, and the 2 men like take up maybe 5% of the screen time. So it's a very woman-forward movie. There's a lesbian painter with who has styled herself to look like a greaser from the 50s, but is still sort of very feminine. It's like a feminine greaser, not a butch greaser. It's amazing. I'm jealous of her hair. And eyeliner. Oh, man. So, I really enjoyed it. Sheila McCarthy won the Genie, which is like the Canadian Oscar for her performance. I'm about to sneeze. Oh my god. Ooh. Sorry, I'm gonna end it before I sneeze on everybody. So it's a great film. It's called I've Heard the Mermaids Singing. It's from 1987. Patricia Rozema. It's on Netflix. Highly recommended.